Our next panelist is Mr. Stephen C. Goss. Mr. Goss is the Chief Actuary of the Social Security Administration. He joined the office of the Chief Actuary in 1973 and has been Chief Actuary since 2001. Mr. Goss is a member of the Society of Actuaries, the American Academy of Actuaries, and the National Academy of Social Insurance. Mr. Goss, thank you very, very much. Mr. Goss is going to be with us virtually. We thank him very much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanders. I hope I'm audible at this point.
You are. You're great.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for the invite, Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Graham, and all the members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We do have some picture board. I think if somebody is doing that, if they could put up slide number 2, that would be great. This is just a reminder that the new trustees report that came out exactly a week ago, as several have mentioned, has updated our projections for the next 75 years and the near term. And the objective of the trustees reports, which by the way have been produced every single year without fail starting in 1941 for this program, have provided to the Congress, the intent is to provide to Congress the financial and actuarial status of the funds for the future, indicating to what extent, if there is a shortfall, there will be a shortfall when and to what degree, thereby giving guidance to members of Congress and the administration as to what kinds of changes might be needed in order to put us back into good financial position. I'm very happy that there was mention of some of the work done in the past for Social Security, and having been around as long as I have, as you indicated, Senator Sanders, I worked very closely with the Greenspan Commission in 1982, as did my entire office, and with a conference committee for the 1983 amendments in 1983, and also with the Simpson Bowles and other commissions since. And let me just say that working with your staff, Senator Graham's staff, and the staff of virtually everybody on your committee, we've had the great pleasure of working with you in developing proposals and scoring them for making progress in the future. So if you could just flip to the next slide or the next panel, this simply just indicates a little bit of an indication of what the change is for this year's trustees report. The shortfall as a percentage of taxable payroll for that, which is the current tax base for Social Security. And last year's trustees report was projected at 3.54% of taxable payroll. It's a little bit better at 3.42% of taxable payroll this year. And let me just mention that over the context of the entire next 75 years, the shortfall of Social Security's revenues in order to pay completely for all the scheduled benefits and law is about 1.2% of GDP. So the shortfall is not enormous, but it is substantial and is something that needs to be addressed. So on the next panel, if we could pop that up, this simply indicates something that you already have seen and have talked about quite a bit, which is the projected point in time at which we believe the trust fund reserves will become depleted. And this is critical. Social Security cannot run out of money. It cannot go bankrupt, but its reserves can become depleted, at which point it would not be able to pay the full scheduled benefits. And in the most recent trustees report, we have pushed out the old age and survivors insurance trust fund reserve depletion date by 1 year because of the experience that we have had over the past year. And by the way, while it is true that price inflation is higher than had been registered by the trustees back in mid-February when we set the assumptions, employment has also improved faster than expected. And I can give you a little forewarning that the average wage in the year 2021 is also growing, is being measured to grow considerably faster than we estimated in the trustees report. So these items will very likely balance each other out and will not result in a worse financial projection than we have in the 2022 trustees report. The disability insurance trust fund is quite a different story because of the recent experience and expectations of lower disability incidence rates than have been assumed for the past several years. We are projecting that the Social Security Disability Insurance Trust Fund will be fully financed even under current law going out for the next 75 years. Now, on the next panel, we can see that the cost and the revenue for Social Security as a percentage of our tax base, taxable payroll, uh, uh, is such that the cost is rising fairly significantly between 2008 and 2030. And the big and that is what is really contributing towards our depleting our reserves and reaching the point where we would only be able to pay out 80% of scheduled benefits under current law in 2035, and that would drop down towards 74% without any action, without any changes in law. But on the next slide, we get to what are the two major factors, which are the reasons. When we have an issue to address, it's always good to know what is causing the issue that we have to address. The first and most important one, and I think Senator Graham indicated this earlier, is the changing age distribution of our population. And since the end of the baby boom period, in 1965, birth rates have been lower, and that has caused a fundamental change in the age distribution of the population. And we are therefore, as the baby boom generation retires and is replaced in working ages by lower birth rate generations, we're having a dramatic increase over time in the number of people over 65 versus working age 20 to 64. The little lines below the red and blue indicate that had the birth rates not dropped from the 3 or 3.0 level per woman that we had had during the baby boom, and basically really for really generations before that, you can see what this age distribution would look like. It would be rising only very slightly because of increasing longevity and or birth rates. So our fundamental problem really derives from the changing in birth rates. But there's one other factor that is worth paying attention to on the next slide, on the next panel, which indicates that, yes, we do have a taxable maximum level. And the taxable maximum since about 1983 has been rising by the average wage growth in our economy. And that has maintained us having about 6% of all workers in the economy having earnings above the taxable maximum, and therefore 94% having earnings below the taxable maximum, and therefore paying on all of their earnings. But the interesting part of this is that because of the changing distribution of earnings, with the highest earners having much higher increases in the past, we have seen a change from 1983 to 2000 over that period, going from that top 6% of workers receiving 9% of all covered earnings up to 16% of all covered earnings, and it's been relatively stable since that time. This fundamental shift really has put a lot of pressure on the trust funds. On the next panel, if I may, let me just indicate very quickly that the next panel indicates something we refer to as benefit replacement rates. It simply indicates the percentage of your career average earnings that would be provided by Social Security. And you can see for the lowest earners, it provides more, and for the highest earners, it provides less. In the future, we're projecting about, for people starting their benefits in retirement at age 65, it'd be about 50% for very low earners, and it'd be about 25% for very high earners. However, on the right-hand panel, you see what will happen to those benefits if we do not make changes in law, and we solve the Social Security shortfall solely by having less benefits payable. I should just remind also that financial planners consistently tell people that they should seek to have 75 to 80% of their prior to retirement earnings covered in retirement. And you can see that Social Security will pay out at most about 50%. So in addition to financing Social Security, obviously we have to stress people having other sources of income. On the very last panel, let me just indicate what I think has already been stated, that in order to fix the imbalance that we have going forward into Social Security, we're going to have legislation by 2035, hopefully well before that, and we're going to have to either increase our scheduled revenue by about a third by that time, or reduce the scheduled benefits by a quarter, or some combination of the two. And again, I would just say that I'm very much looking forward to our office being able to work with all of you, and want to commend, by the way, both Senator Sanders and Senator Graham for their efforts back in 2011 when we worked with them on bills that would have at that time extended the projected solvency of Social Security fully 75 years. Very different approaches, but at least they both came to the same end result of extending solvency for 75 years. So we're happy to have worked, Senator Sanders, with you and your staff on the latest bill, which was just introduced today, which through a combination of factors will again have the prospect of extending solvency out to 75 years.
Okay.
So thank you very much. Sorry for running over on time.
No, that's
But,
okay. And thank you very much, Mr. Goss, for your work in general and for so many years. And thank you very much for the analysis you did of the legislation that I and others have just introduced. I just, we're going to be pretty brief and want to have you confirm or not my understanding of your analysis of our legislation. It is my understanding that the Social Security Administration has found that the legislation I've introduced today would expand benefits across the board starting in 2023. Is that correct?
that is correct.
It is my understanding that the Social Security Administration has found that if this bill were signed into law, Social Security would be solvent for more than 75 years. Is that correct?
That is, in fact, the conclusion that our office comes to based on the baseline projections recently developed with our Board of Trustees.
It is my understanding that the Social Security Administration has found that if this bill were signed into law, the bottom 93% of Americans would not see their payroll taxes go up by 1 penny. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, it might even be closer to the bottom 94%.
In other words, what you are confirming is that this legislation would expand Social Security benefits and fully fund Social Security for more than 75 years by demanding that the very wealthiest people in this country pay more in taxes. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct, Senator Sanders, and I would just add that, as I think you have indicated very clearly, your bill that was introduced today would not only expand revenue by the payroll tax above $250,000 earnings level, but also would, in fact, bring some new tax to the trust funds based on investment income.
Right.
And the combination of those provide the amount of revenue to end up getting us this result.
That's correct. Okay, Mr. Goss, thank you so much. Appreciate the work you have done and your being with us today. And with that, before we close, I would like to ask unanimous consent, which is not going to be hard to get given everyone else is here, that 3 statements be entered into the record. One is a set of estimates of the Social Security Expansion Act prepared by Steve Goss and his team at the Social Security Administration. The other statements are letters of support from AFSCME and the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. And without objections, so ordered. And let me just conclude by thanking all of the witnesses for being with us today. As information for all senators, questions for the record are due by 12 noon tomorrow, with signed hand copies delivered to the committee clerk at Dirksen 624. Email copies will also be accepted. Under our rules, the witnesses will have 7 days from receipt of our questions to respond with answers. And with no further business, this hearing is adjourned.